Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with another art commentary video for you guys because I recently worked on this commission and I loved how it turned out so much and just the concept behind it, so I just wanted to share it with the world and hopefully you guys will like it as much as I do. So I received the brief for this commission via Instagram by one of my followers, and they had seen that I had done some fan art for Disenchantment, which is this amazing 2D animated series that's sort of in the style of like The Simpsons or Futurama, but it's sort of got a medieval setting. So the client had seen the fan art that I had done previously, which was of the main character Bean and her two companions, and they wanted me to do some more fan art, but with the character Merkimer. So Merkimer is this character in Disenchantment, and he is sort of betrothed to the main character, Bean, and he's sort of this very dislikable prince, I guess. But sometime during the series he accidentally gets turned into a pig. So he's got this like human and pig form, which is it's really funny. But the client wanted me to portray both Merkimer in his human form and Merkimer in his pig form. So already I knew I wanted to have this like mirrored kind of symmetrical sort of composition going on. So some ideas for the commission that were thrown around were having these two forms of Merkimer sort of mirrored, perhaps holding a mirror or holding a goblet or reclining in like a lazy chair or something. There are a lot of different environments in the series that I could have used, but I decided to go with the throne room just because it's quite recognisable, and I thought it would be quite fitting having both of the characters sort of lounging around in the throne, especially since he is a prince and it was sort of implied that he would later rule the kingdom. So initially I had them in two separate chairs, but it kind of was messing with the composition. The two characters' faces are two focal points that I really wanted the viewer's eye to be drawn to, so having them two separated was kind of distracting and kind of drew your eyes off the page. So I decided to put them in one chair just so they'd be nice and close together and so that the focal point would be in the centre of the image. It also kind of emphasises the fact that they are the same person. I made sure that the pig form of Merkimer and the human form of Merkimer were sort of had the same poses and the same sort of expression. Because it's Merkimer, I knew I wanted to give him like a really cocky sort of vain pose because he's looking at himself in the mirror. I'm actually not too well versed in making characters look unattractive or giving them cartoony sort of features like a double chin or an overly large nose, but I think I did it in a way that it wasn't too off-putting but still looked like him. Let me know how I did. I definitely like to try and draw some more unique face shapes in the future. So one thing that I get asked a lot about my art process is how do I achieve my lighting, and I thought I would slow down the time lapse and sort of really break it down for you guys. So as you can see, I start with putting in like base colors, and these are the very core colors that aren't affected at all by any lighting or any atmosphere. So you can see I literally just color picked from the official character art. So after I put these base colors in, I add a new layer, and that will be either a multiply layer or a color dodge layer. So I knew in this instance that I wanted to have a really strong backlighting on the characters, and I wanted it to be almost as if the sun is just shining through that stained glass window behind them, and it's sort of having these like god ray sort of effects. So I added a color dodge layer behind all of the characters, and I made it a really nice warm orange tone. You can see I put it in with a nice soft Photoshop default brush, and it starts out a little bit yellow, but then you sort of need to adjust the hue to get those really nice warm oranges, and that's really all that you need to do. Like already it is just that one layer and that one action has taken this piece so far. Colour dodge is something that you sort of have to watch out for though, because it can very easily be overused and abused as a tool, and that's when you start to get overexposed, really shiny values. So I tend to start with really dark base colours, so it sort of makes sense to then add light on top of those base colours. But oftentimes I would use the multiply layer as well, or instead. And if you cover the whole piece with one coloured multiply layer, it can really help to unite all of the base colours, because oftentimes they kind of don't go with each other or they clash too much, so using a multiply layer will also sort of unite all of those base colours. I didn't really use it in this exact commission because I thought the colours were sort of dark enough, but you can see me use it here and there in the ambient occlusion sort of places. And that is a really simplified breakdown of how I achieve my lighting. This works like every single time. It is always a part of my process. It's really the standard for me. But if you would like to see any other breakdowns of particular drawing techniques, or if you'd like to learn anything in particular, feel free to leave it in the comments or just let me know. So this is the stage where I'm sort of turning the line art into my signature painterly sort of style. And a lot of people ask like how to do that and how to turn line art into painterly, and I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I know I definitely did at the start of my art process. I like to add some colour to my line work. You can see that I use like a dark red or like a pink sort of tone rather than having black lines. And then I like to merge them with like the fill layer, and then it makes it super easy to just paint over. One thing that I've absolutely been loving recently when drawing gloves on a character is adding a seam that goes down the side of the pinky and down the side of the hand, and also in between the fingers. I think it's a really cute little detail that helps distinguish a glove from just a coloured hand. And one thing that I realised about Merkimer's cartoon character, or the official art, is that he doesn't have any eyebrows. So I decided to just soften his eyebrows a little bit and make them a little bit more faint than I'm used to, but they are still there. This is also my first time drawing a pig character, so I kind of struggled with the anatomy a little bit, trying to balance cartoony and funny with realistic. So I made sure to give him lots of wrinkles and lots of rolls of fat, and I think I found a good balance between the two styles. I also like using one brush for all sort of textures and everything that you see in the piece. I tend to stick to like square shaped charcoal brushes that have a little bit of texture to them, and you can see that I use this brush for so many different textures. It works for the hair, it works for the metals, it works for the clothes, it works for the skin. I think it really helps the piece look cohesive and put together. But every now and then I will use a specialty brush. This one is called the Sparkle brush, and it's really good for adding highlights that sort of have that diamond sort of sparkle to them. You can also see that I used like a rock brush for the initial background, which I later paint over. So one thing that I was really proud of about this commission is how I got so many like shiny textures going on. I think the metal turned out really well, but I also really like how I did the blue and gold on Merkimer's clothing. And I think my biggest tip for that is to add a lot of colour variation and hue variation. You see that in the gold, I add oranges and I add more greeny sort of yellows, and I add really bright brights and really dark darks, and that sort of gives it a lot of contrast, but also it looks quite reflective. In the blues, you can see I opt for a more greener light blue and a more purpley sort of dark blue. You can see it really clearly in the crevice of his hip, where I add like a really ultramarine sort of blue. And this helps give it that silky satin sort of look. I contrast this with the other elements of his clothing like the red vest and the white tights, they've got much tamer values and less colour variation, and that sort of gives it a more matte sort of look, like it's made of cotton. And the complete opposite of those matte textures is this super shiny, metallic, reflective mirror that both of the characters are holding. And a really quick and easy way that I like to add that really polished, shiny, metallic look is I give it these two diagonal stripes that are in a really bright, saturated colour. And you can see me doing a really quick, sneaky copy and paste for the mirrors just so I don't have to render them both. Just making sure that I'm changing the shape of the diagonal on the second one so they are at the same angle and they're both facing the same way, and I feel like it sort of makes a little bit more sense. You can see that I also like to add colour variation to skin tones. You can see this especially in the pig, where I add a much more saturated pink to his hands and his feet, his nose and his cheeks and his ears. These are the areas that have the most blood vessels and like get exposed to the sun quite a lot. Even in humans, these areas tend to be a little bit more pink and a little bit more saturated. And I think this really brings this character to life. It looks like he's actually capable of blushing, and he does have blood underneath that skin. So that's my tip for drawing human or animal skin, is to add a little bit of red to those areas. And throughout the whole painting process, you can see me sort of switching between the round, soft Photoshop default brush and that square charcoal brush that I sort of mentioned before. And I use the soft brush to cover big, round sort of areas like the pig's tummy, and then I use the sharper charcoal brush to go into those more finer, detailed areas like around his knees. And last but not least, it was just about the finishing touches, really finishing that background, adding some wood texture to the chair, cleaning up the rock texture on the walls, cleaning up the stained glass windows and sort of making it look a little bit more shattered and a little bit more mosaic and put together. I also added some rips to the carpet and some gold trim on the pillows, and I think this really made it seem a little bit more regal and a little bit more used. As for the wood texture, I keep it really linear and just add some wonky lines to sort of convey that wood grain, and adding a knot or a circle here and there just to really give it that sense of imperfection. I modelled this throne after the actual throne that's in the TV series, so it was pretty easy to just come up with a design. Usually architecture isn't really my forte. The client sort of suggested that Merkimer was looking a little bit too skinny, so I made sure to add some pull in his vest, as if his stomach is sort of adding some strain onto the cloth. And after this, it was just a matter of cleaning up the less important areas of the characters, like the feet and legs. These are sort of the areas that no one really looks at. They're not really an important focal point, but it is nice to have them all finished. So I added a little bit of dirt on the boots, just because it kind of makes sense to have a little bit of dirt on your boots if you've been walking around in the mud all day, just to make it a little bit more realistic. I loved working on this piece so much. The client was absolutely incredible, coming up with such a good idea and being so supportive and so creative with the concept, just so welcoming with everything that I had to throw at them. So thank you to that person. As for the glass, I made sure to add these dark grey outlines to make sure it looks really fused together like a mosaic, and I just went over the rock texture with my painterly brush just to bring it all together. And that is pretty much the end of the piece. I hope you guys liked it. I've really been enjoying doing these commentaries, so much so that I brought a new mic, so hopefully the audio is much better than the previous video. and it's only going to get better from here, so do let me know if you're enjoying them and if there's anything you'd like to learn or see. And last but not least, the foreground was looking a little bit empty, and I thought as an ode to my original fan art of Being Lucy and Elfo that I could add some bits and pieces to sort of give it a little bit more visual interest. So I added some coins, like a fallen goblet, a king's cloak, and just scattered them around to make it seem like they've really broken into the throne room and they're just taking full advantage of all the stuff that's in there. And just to give it that extra little bit of punch, I added linear sort of god rays that are just punching out behind that chair, and it really gives it this like heavenly sort of glow. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I really enjoyed making it. I would also really enjoy turning this commission into a print to sort of go with the bean fan art that I already have, so if you are interested in buying a print, definitely let me know and we can make it happen. Otherwise, you can check out my store in the description below, and I've also got links to all of my social media, so be sure to check that out as well. Once again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.